Deanna, thank you so much for coming on to the Stop Chasing Pain podcast. I'm
Oh,
so excited to have you here.
thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, Perry. It's a pleasure.
Well, many people who follow me or have been to some of my courses know about you because I talk about you a lot and your work a ton, the block therapy, because I use that for myself. And some of my followers know because I mentioned how so very helpful you were in helping my son Adam, who suffered a severe lower back disc herniation last year and was in a pretty bad way. And I was just overwhelmed for trying to take care of him myself. So I decided to reach out to people that I respect and admire and trust. And you got back to me right away and jumped on a video chat with him to give some help and suggestions. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so very much for doing that for me and for him.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime. It's such a pleasure to be working with you. And it was so nice to meet your son.
Thank you. Thank you. He's doing much better, by the way. And it's been a year since that. And, he does things on a daily, some of the things that you showed him, which we're definitely going to get into later because I love your perspective on working with him. And I think some of the things that really drawn me to your work was that, stop chasing pain is how I go about things. I look at the side of pain, but I try to look at everything else, which can be certainly overwhelming. And that's what I like about what you do is that you're talking about a full human being where it's all connected. And you just didn't automatically, with your block therapy and your treatment, start trying to go in and mash out areas that were painful. Can you tell me, because what I'd like to know is this, did you discover that kind of for yourself or on your own journey of working with people? And was there something that brought you into seeing that or into this work in general?
Yeah, great question. So I've been in this work for, gosh, almost 25 years now. Scary to
Mm.
think. Time flies.
Goes
Um,
fast, right?
Yeah. And for the first over a decade, I was really focused on patient work, working with my hands. Fluid isometrics is the technique I developed, and then block therapy became the self-care version of that technique. What was
Mm.
really fascinating for me, though, was one of my very first challenges that I did was, I can't even remember what year it was. It was many years ago, but I took people through a 21-day challenge through the Christmas season because we wanted to see how this work would benefit maintaining size and shape, even though this is the season when people tend to indulge. And I
Mm.
think I had 80 people or so going through this. And what was fascinating for me was all but three people actually decreased in their size and shape during the holidays using this protocol, except for three. And two of them happened to live in my city. And I wanted to see why they
Mm.
were the ones not gaining the same results as everybody else. So I invited these two people to my apartment so I could actually take a look at what their bodies were doing. And I recognized in that moment that their calves were so incredibly bound and tight that they weren't able to move the toxins out of the body, move the energy properly throughout the body. So that became a really integral
Mm.
understanding for me is there's these cause sites that are affecting the body as a whole. So again, that was years ago, and that just became an impetus for me to really understand that where we need to focus as far as sensation is very different from where we have the causes of that. And really, when it comes to fascia, it's really about understanding how the fascia will grip and bind to bone with a force of up to 2,000 pounds per square inch. And it happens to be at the extremities because this is where it is the
Mm.
furthest from the body's furnace, the diaphragm. So understanding that these cause sites are so impactful to what's going on for the rest of the body was a really big understanding for me. And I've utilized that understanding through the years as I've continued to evolve with this practice.
Oh, I love that. You have the same kind of bug I do, which is curiosity, right? Thinking, well, that's very interesting. I wonder why these two didn't. And so just so people kind of know the power of that, why do you think the Cavs played such a role overall for them, uh, physiological wise, that made such a shift for them?
So if I can just talk about a little bit about how I sort of see the fascist system.
Yes,
I've
please do.
Okay, I've spent well over 60,000 hours in my life with my hands dealing in people's bodies, including my own, to really get an understanding of how our bodies wind down over time and where these holding patterns are. So I see the fascia as basically the cell membrane of every cell connected to every other cell. So it's the communication system, and the combination of primarily the two proteins, collagen and elastin, when in balance, provide the opportunity for us to be nice and mobile, but to have integrity of structure.
Mm.
So the goal with that being, as long as our cells are properly aligned, there's optimal space in and around the cell, space for ease of absorption of nutrients into the cell, as well as the release of toxins away from the cell. However, that's not our reality. We are under this constant force of gravity pulling us down as we go through time. We're dominant on one side, so we don't age in a linear collapse. We spiral down toward the earth. And then there's our entire lifetime and lifetimes prior, if you believe in that, that have actually made this system, this body that we have in this very moment today, including all the surgeries, all the injuries, all the traumas, everything that makes up our being in this moment. So what ultimately happens with that collagen elastin balance is the collagen starts to migrate to areas of need, that structural component. So for example, if I'm sitting in front of a computer slumped over for decades, which many people have, in order for me not to tip over because I'm not supporting proper postural foundation, that collagen migrates to those areas of need to create false walls and false floors. But
Mm.
those act like scar tissue created from injury or surgery. They become barricades to blood and oxygen flow, and they grip to bone with a 2,000 pound per square inch seal, holding us with that incredible force out of alignment. However, it's a magnetic force. So if we have magnets far enough apart from each other, they have no attraction. Bring them close together and they'll seal with the force. Try to pull them apart, pretty impossible, but we can shear them apart from each other. So it was through my exploration of my own body, as well as working on patients over the years, and really taking a look at what's holding people back from releasing those negative patterns that have been created over time, so we could bring those cells back to correct alignment to have that optimal space. And just from experience with patients feeling the density in the calves and recognizing the cold feet and how the feet ultimately will dictate the patterning up the chain, that became like a really deep understanding for me that this area of the body is so important, because literally every single step we take is going to reinforce the pattern that we're in. So if we have a frozen shoulder, for example, and we
Mm.
work on that area, but then we start walking and we continue to get pulled into the negative pattern that's creating that negative alignment in the first place, we're just going to be running in circles as opposed to getting to the root of the issue. So it was just really through the years of experience working on patients and myself where I really got this understanding of releasing the calves and the feet, releasing the forearms and the hands, as well as the head, because
Mm.
all of these areas, again, are the furthest from that diaphragm. And that's where we seal with that most profound magnetic force. So it's been all experiential for me.
Well, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I love that the view of that, and it makes sense to me as well. Is that the hands and the feet and up here? Those are the places that you use most to interact with the world,
Yes.
right? All that information going in, but how many people really come in and say, you know, "Doc, Deanna, I got to see you. The hands may not hurt, or sometimes the feet do. Yeah, the feet are, but they usually have a complaint somewhere else, more towards the center.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that's where we focus, but we can become pulled in what I call into the quicksand of looking so central. And that's what you found for Adam. And I'll say from here is that, see, I teach this stuff and I know this stuff, but I also know how it feels when you are hurt, you have a loved one that hurt. It's easy to forget some of these foundational principles because you just want to feel better. And you don't want to suffer. You don't want who you love to suffer. So you keep going after their suffering.
Yes.
And you brought back to me the lens to say, let me just see his feet. And boy, did you find some stuff with him. Right? Because he's 6'7", really tall. And then that just manifested some stuff over time in his back.
Well, and I do it for myself as well. I mean, my left hip, that's been sort of my stickler for pain in my life with a bunch of injuries from my past. And I still get caught when I'm like, okay, I've got some time to work on myself. I'll go to the pain and then I have to remind myself, wait a sec. If I just keep focusing on that pain, I'm not going to get to the root of these issues. So it is funny how we're drawn to, it's kind of like the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right?
Yeah, right.
And we have to realize that there's a whole bunch of areas in the body that might not be, complaining, but if we don't address those areas complaining are going to continue to speak. It's like the
Yeah.
compression and ballooning. I like using the analogy. If you had a balloon and you squeezed it, the opposite side is going to be under pressure. So that's where we feel the tension and the pain, but it's the squeezing that we need to address to release that. If we go and we keep working where the ballooning is, again, we're not going to get to that root.
Yeah, it's a great example for a herniation because that's basically what that is,
Yes.
right? A
Yeah.
balloon pushing out in there. And what I'm curious about is your journey over that time of when you discovered that. Tell me about the learning curve of the difference between the work that you teach, which I really love once I started to understand neurology a little bit more on my journey of the smash and grab, dig in, go as deep as you can to the earth, make them scream on the table to release the fascia because more is better, as opposed to sinking in and feeling and slowly letting it release. Did you discover that over the course of why is this stuff not working the way I thought it would?
Yeah, and great question. Like, so 25 years ago, when this journey began for me specifically, it was with my own body. I was 50 pounds overweight, struggling with anxiety, depression, chronic pain. The harder I worked out, the harder I worked on my body, the more compressed, ballooned,
Mm.
and congested and toxic I became. So I recognized early on in my 20s when I was training as an athletic therapist. So I'm doing what I learned to do in university and to work with these elite athletes. And I'm doing all the work, yet my body is getting bigger and it's getting just, again, like more toxic. And the feeling of failure was very real for me because I'm doing the work. I'm in the gym, I'm doing the weights, I'm running all of this stuff. And the harder that I worked, the bigger I became. So it was actually when I started the practice of yoga when I was 30 years old that I was in a class with a wonderful teacher for the first time. And every 30, 45 seconds, she would remind us to breathe. And in that moment, I recognized, wow, every time you're reminding me to breathe, I'm holding my breath. So that became like a really foundational moment for me. But also at that same time, I made some big changes in my life and I started having really severe anxiety attacks. And it was this one attack in particular that was the seed of my understanding of everything to come. Because in that moment, in my panic, I actually thought I was going to die because I was so frozen. My breath was
Mm.
locked. For some reason, though, I intuitively dove my hand into my belly. And that was the moment that really opened everything up for me because, first of all, I never touched that area. I hated it. That was where I stored the majority of my size and shape. I was ashamed of it. So here I am diving my hand into this space, but I encounter pain as a first sensation. But the pain brought me out of my crazy brain. And I'm like, okay, I'm in my body, I'm breathing, I'm alive. And then I intuitively started exploring with my hands. And I recognized the tissue was marbled with what felt like scar tissue, even though I hadn't had any injury or surgery in that area. So after the first evening of just intuitively exploring in that space, first of all, I felt calm, which was very not my normal. Woke up the
Mm.
next day feeling a little tender from what I did, but still feeling calm. I was excited after working with patients all day to get back home and to dive back in. And after that second night of exploring, when I stood up, I felt taller. And I went and I looked at myself in the mirror, and my belly was flatter than it had looked in years.
Mm.
So this became this new way of me approaching my body. Instead of that forceful, hard, sweating like crazy and getting nowhere fast, for me, I was experiencing this very incredibly profound shifting very quickly by being more restorative with my tissue, by being kinder to my body. So that became my new approach to dealing with myself as well as dealing with my patients. And very quickly, I started attracting other therapists because I was getting these tremendous results and they wanted to learn what I was doing. And that was, again, about 25 years ago. So it's really just been this constant evolution of understanding, first and foremost, what my body needed, and then applying
Mm.
that to patients and seeing their changes and just continuing to learn and evolve along the way.
Oh, I love that. And I bet you when you started to check that area in the people that you were working with, you probably found a lot of abdomens that were feeling the same, right?
Absolutely, and I mean, it made so much sense to me too, why even though like, I always thought, like, "Why are the rules of weight loss not applying to me? Because 'Cause I'm doing the work, right? I'm sweating like a fiend, I'm starving myself, like, all these crazy, crazy mindsets of what it would take to actually change this container of mine, and then, again, to just be so kind with my body and to start seeing these changes really rapidly taking
Mm,
place. It was such a delight for me, and and also just that restoration piece. So I also started doing restorative yoga classes, and all the holds were long, and you're connecting to the breath. And then as you're connecting in those long holds, you're really pulling up those deeper
mm.
emotions, those deeper understandings of your body. So all of that combined really created this foundational way for me to approach patients and then to approach a way of creating an opportunity for people to learn self-care.
Wow, it's like I'm kind of hearing my own story. I mean, we had different pathways of getting there, but I'm like, wow, that sounds like me because I was what I call hashtag beast mode monster. Like, go hard or go home, and more is better from the exercises to the soft tissue work and all that stuff. And I'm like, I just don't understand. So then I realized I got to flip a switch here. And I just first of all started checking areas that I didn't really look at, and that was the abdomen. And mine was like yours. It was like, holy God, it's really hard in there and hurt. But what got me is that when I started to go in there, I got very emotional too.
Mm.
It was almost like something released in me through the tissues, but through inside as well. And then when I began to study more about from the classical osteopathic medicine, I read a quote from a guy. His name is Dr. Fulford, Fulford, and he said that he's one of those old schools, And he said he finds that emotional trauma and shock in his experience are located right there in that center. And then that just made so much sense to me that I could grab onto that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love your block therapy so much is because you were one of the few people that actually talks about that region, but then giving people some kind of a tool or instrument that they can ease into that with the block therapy. I think that's like the abdominal diaphragm region and navel, which nobody ever talks about the freaking navel, but about you and me, I think. And you just have them lay in that region as one of the first things to do for themselves, right?
Always. The 72,000 currents that distribute the life force throughout the body culminate at the belly button.
Mm,
So it's such an incredibly potent area of the body. And yet, because if we're not breathing diaphragmatically, I'm just going to draw up my camera here for a sec. So I know you
sure.
know this, but just for the listeners, when we're breathing diaphragmatically, the diaphragm moves down with the inhale and lifts with the exhale. And if it's working properly, it creates a strong support for everything above. When we aren't conscious diaphragmatic breathers, this muscle becomes weak and we fall in and
Mm,
we collapse and we balloon. So that was me working out. The harder I was working because I was holding my breath. I was such a strong upper chest breather for a variety of reasons, trauma, as well as being a dancer as a teenager, a Highland dancer, and always told, hold your belly in. So if you're holding your belly in, you're not breathing diaphragmatically. And so I became very weak with that muscle, causing
mm,
everything else in my upper body to come crashing down into that core space. And then I started really understanding as I was diving my hands into this region and creating a release. And again, connecting that with what I was learning through yoga with the full exhale, I was starting to feel this lightness and I was actually able to lift my rib cage up. And I had a ton of emotional releases as well. I stored so much shame in that space.
yeah.
And partly because of what that space looked like. It felt so well, it feels that way because it's not healthy, right? Like it's full of inflammation. I was constipated. I was full of toxins. So we certainly can't feel attractive or healthy when our bodies are like filled with all of that past stuff. And it was like
Mm.
you're trapped in the past, right? Because if you're not eliminating effectively every single day, you're getting this buildup of all the stuff from before. And then the uh, stagnancy and all of that stuff that comes with lack of proper elimination and lymphatic flow. So when I started really getting a sense of this movement through that movement of the breath and that releasing of those adhesions, that became a foundational exercise that we have every single person do before any class that we do, so we can turn on the body's furnace.
Mm.
I live in Winnipeg in Canada, and it can be minus 35 Celsius here in the winter. And if you have a car sitting outside, chances are you're not going to be able to turn that car on in the morning and have it start.
Right.
So that's kind of like the same thing as if we're not breathing diaphragmatically, we have a frozen body, and then we
Yeah.
expect it to function and move with a snap of a finger, and it's not going to do that. I want to have that car that, is the right temperature, and I go and I turn it on and it's ready to go. That's what we want the body to be. And when we're breathing diaphragmatically, we keep the body energized, we keep it heated properly, so that when we need to perform whatever daily activities we're doing, or if something crazy and stressful happens, our body's prepared for that, then we can do that with ease. And we can also recover very quickly. However, if we're frozen and we're asked
Mm.
to do things, it's a very different situation and scenario. And most people's bodies are quite frozen because, frankly, most people are breathing through the muscles of the upper chest. Pain, fear, and stress cause us to reactively hold the breath. And this world is incredibly stressful 24/7. So in the past, when it was a benefit, when we needed to, run away from something and turn on that adrenaline, now it's pumping. And again, we've got this cortisol poisoning and all of the things that come with adrenal fatigue, because largely we're not breathing from the right place.
Yeah, you just get locked into that thing I think more people are hearing about now, the fight or flight, hypervigilance. Everything's just tight and tense. And yeah, actually, another thing you said struck with me because once again, we have a similar story. I read a quote once, I can't remember who said it, but what you have shame or when you have shame around something, you immobilize it. And I thought about that because I was the same. When I was younger, I was very heavy and overweight and obese as a kid. And the last thing you want to do is stand tall like that. You want to just shrink in and pull in because you just actually, you hate yourself, which I did, and
Yeah.
everything about this region. So it clamps down. And, I held on to those things deep inside of my body. So that 13, 14-year-old kid who was relentlessly bullied still feels that when he was 48, when I got really, really sick. So there was a lot of healing that went along with that region. And when I started to check that in the people that come to see me, what I've noticed is that their nervous system always starts to get a little bit jittery when I start to get anywhere near the the abdominal diaphragm region. There's always something there, and every single one of them was like, "Holy cow, doc!" Like I had no idea that was gonna hurt. I'm like, but I did. I didn't tell him, but
Well, and that's the other piece, right? Like our brain can only handle so much incoming information. So when
right.
we moving into our body on purpose, we are moving to find what's deeper than what we're consciously aware of. And it can be shocking because you think like, I didn't think when I was storing that extra 50 pounds that there was anything inside there because I never touched it. I mean, other than the shame and the emotional baggage
Mm,
I was carrying around. I never put pressure into that area. I never had my hands there, let alone did anyone else ever touch that area. So when I finally did for that first time during that anxiety attack and I encountered pain, because for me, I had such extreme anxiety that I understand why people cut and they do things
yeah.
to bring themselves into their body, because that was what it was for me. It was a connection to take me out of my crazy and bring me back into my body where I felt safe. So for me, the pain was a safety compared to that level of anxiety that I was storing. And now I teach people to find pain on purpose and to love it. And what's
Mhm.
beautiful about this whole thing too is because the pressure fibers are larger in diameter than the pain fibers, when we actually start to move in consciously with breath, with intention, then those pressure fibers kick in. And then the pain becomes a very different sensation than what
Mm,
we're dealing with as we go through movement or whatever it is that we're dealing with on a daily basis.
So when people are doing that through your work, it's something where what I like about it is you're in that moment and you're just in that moment, getting a connection with your body that you more than likely have lost a long time ago. And you're not thinking of yesterday, you're not thinking of tomorrow. You got to be like right here, which in and of itself can be healing because you just got to focus on the now.
Yes, and that's the beautiful thing. Plus, because people, we teach people like you're in control of this. There's not somebody else doing this to you. You're the one
Ah,
in control, and your breath is your guide. So we teach you that as long as you're breathing in a relaxed way, you're feeding and healing. So keeping that parasympathetic system engaged while you're going through the process of the pain teaches a very important component because I mean, again, we're living in a crazy, stressful world, but that doesn't mean our inner terrain has to be stressed. Conversely, though, we can be in a totally calm space and our internal system can be hyper stressed because of where the breath comes from. When we're
mm,
breathing diaphragmatically, the brain frequency is in a relaxed state. When we're breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, we're in that fight or flight state. So we're thinking of past and future, which is where fear lives, which isn't real. I like the acronym false energy acting real for fear, right?
mm.
It's not real. It's perceived. And that comes with that upper chest breath. So if that's where we're breathing from all the time, that's where we're living in our brain. So our whole perception of life is different when we're breathing from there. And the reality is even if we're doing breathing techniques, because of the way the fascia will grip and adhere to bone. So again, if I've been sitting 20 years in front of a computer locked away this way,
Yeah.
now my diaphragm is locked. So even if I'm doing breathing work, that's not going to release the rib cage to give you access to the full diaphragm.
Mm.
That's where the work with block therapy comes in because we do that. We decompress the fascia from the bone where it's compressed and binding, and then
Mm.
pump life into it through the breath.
Is that one of the reasons why you lean towards that special type of wood that you use to help ease into that, as opposed to like cement? You know?
Yeah, and bone and wood are similar in density, so they
Oh,
love each other. We started actually making our tools out of cedar in the very beginning journey of this whole thing out of a garage. Then we outgrew that, and we needed something similar in density, and we want it to be a natural product. So then we went to bamboo, and we were having them made in China from bamboo. Then with COVID and shipping and all of those challenges, I'm like, we need to bring this back home, and I need to find the best material. So I always feel God's been providing the solutions for us as the need comes up. And just as
mm,
we were looking for the right material, because cedar became way too expensive. Also, there's a lot of other challenges with cedar. We have these beautiful Dutch elm trees in Winnipeg, but Dutch elm disease was running rampant. And these are 100-year-old massive trees that they were cutting down and then putting in a chipper, just destroying them. And this couple who were foresters that would go around tagging the trees to be cut, they're like, why are they just getting thrown away? There's all of the bark is fine, or not the bark, all of the tree is fine, the wood. So they actually created a company called Urban Lumber where they are preparing the wood properly. So we are their biggest user of the Dutch elm trees. So our tools are now, I've got a factory here in Winnipeg that we built, and we're making all of our tools out of elm, and it's just the most beautiful wood. And it's so lovely that it's just right here in our backyard. So yeah, we've got unlimited supply of raw material probably for decades.
oh wow, what a lovely story that is. Talk about everything coming full circle and showing up when you need it, right?
It sure did, yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that drew me to your work is yeah, very few people understand the role of fluid movement in the body, fluid hydrodynamics, which is something that's fascinated me for many years, and I geek out on it a lot. And then when I found your work, you start talking about fluid. I'm like, okay, this is good. This is really good. And you were talking about lymphatics for quite a while before anybody else was. I've been doing it for about 10 years, but I think you've been doing it even longer than that. And can you tell me, from your perspective, how does your view of the body through that fluid lens influence what you do?
It's everything, in fact, the technique that block therapy is the self-care version of is called fluid isometrics. So I want to share a great little story as to when I coined fluid isometrics. I was working on a quadriplegic at the time.
Mm,
So 220-pound, 25-year-old guy that a year prior had broke his neck diving into a pool or into a lake. So
mm,
now he's on my table. And I mean, when you're trying to lift somebody that can't move themselves, the weight is pretty crazy. So he was on my massage table. I was straddling his thighs and I grabbed his arms and I would lift him up. So he was at about a 45-degree angle. And I was just sitting there with him and I was holding him. And even though I wasn't moving my arms, because the pressure created heat and it created a releasing of the shoulder blades, we started to do this dance. And as I was doing this, the fluidity came into his upper body and started to melt and release the shoulder blade that was glued and stuck to the rib cage. So you can imagine this incredible force that created
mm,
this, this alignment. He was literally like this when I started with him. They had to belt him to the chair. He could only move his arms about 10 degrees from his side. And then after I started doing this work, suddenly he was able to bring his arms up. He even had them all the way up over his head. And he was even able to, I mean, I was working full body and I worked on him for quite a while, but he was even able
mhm,
to move side to side and lift his body up from seated. So we took this frozen body that had no movement and we turned it into a fluid body through the process of melting. And that was a big distinguisher for me. We weren't just releasing areas, we were getting into the tissue and we were through pressure over time, which creates heat, and connecting diaphragmatically to that breath, which creates that internal furnace, turning that furnace on inside the body. Now we were able to very effectively melt the adhesions in the scar tissue because essentially they're frozen. So,
mm,
like ice compared to water, the dense, hard bodies are cold and frozen because the diaphragm is your body's furnace. And if you're breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, it's like having a space heater. So, again, I live in a 30-story building in Winnipeg. And if we didn't have a furnace for the building and I only had a space heater for my apartment, I'd heat one room in this
mm,
apartment, but turn the building's furnace on, the entire building gets heated. So when we can understand how significant the diaphragm is functioning properly to keep the body heated, that in my view is truly what creates that movement, that fluid piece for the entire body, because it really comes down to tissue temperature. And cells that
mm.
are being pulled far away from their home, they're frozen, they're lost, they're not connected. So we want to bring the cells back to their proper alignment through conscious action and how we use our body, how we hold our body, but also through that breath. It's really the foundational piece of this whole work is understanding proper diaphragmatic breathing. That's what creates the lymphatic flow, the nerve flow, the blood flow, and keeps the body heated from head to toe, from core to surface. So that's the key, is the tissue temperature for flow.
Oh, I love that. And of course, the diaphragm change in pressure in the body. And it's really funny because people always ask me, well, they've been asked me, I jokingly say, how do you know you have a diaphragm problem? And my answer is yes. Well,
Exactly.
because you got one. I mean, you're most likely, not using it as optimally as you can. People just don't know it, and until something happens to them and they start to get some symptoms. And honestly, even then, they might not know it because what I've discovered is, we're in this bubble of people who know a lot of stuff about diaphragms. But when you go out into this thing called the real world, nobody knows what you're talking about, right? I mean, isn't it crazy?
It is, and I don't think people even recognize still the mechanical aspect of the
Mm,
diaphragm and what that does. So again, like here's the diaphragm, and we've got the stomach organ, we have the aorta, the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder, the heart, and the lungs. So when this muscle is working properly, we're getting an internal heating and energy input to these organs. So think about the average person with gut issues. First of all, likely they're not chewing their food well. So now they're
mm,
swallowing chunks of food whole into the stomach container. When we're breathing diaphragmatically and we have correct alignment, that action of the diaphragm is giving the stomach a massage. And we
Mm,
know what massage does, it gives energy to that area. So that active breath helps the digestive process. But the thing is, the majority of people are right-handed, so we often collapse over to the left. Now I've
yeah.
got the stomach organ getting pushed around, compressed, and there's no activity here. Also, the aorta, that straw leaving the heart, it's going to get compressed and
Mm.
back. Now the heart has to work harder. How many people have fatty liver disease? Think of butter at room temperature as a solid heated, it's a liquid. When we're not breathing, we're not giving the liver that mechanical heating action.
Mhm.
So the mechanics of the breath itself and the fascia, understanding how to move the body properly, that's what allows our systems to have the energy to do their job. And when the diaphragm isn't working, now we've got the weight of the rib cage and everything above crashing into that core space. So now we have the stomach organ. And if it's getting, again, compressed and ballooned, think of what a balloon looks like when you've blown it up too many times. How many people have leaky gut? So, I mean, you can go on
Mm.
and on about sort of really understanding the compression and ballooning and the toxicity that results, as well as the lack of blood and oxygen and nutrients that are going to get fed into the cell
Mm.
because of what happens to the structure.
Yeah. Oh man, that is so well said. It's so true because I see many people in my world who have like autoimmune disease. And sometimes one, sometimes they've been diagnosed with several of them. And in my world, it just means you got trapped inflammation. That's all it means. It's just you throw whatever label you want to on it. And they're all stuck up underneath that rib cage, and they usually have some type of visceral stagnation of either lymphatics and blood flow. And I always tell anybody, if you took the time to crack open an anatomy and physiology book, you would never have to ask the question of why are you working on the navel. It should be blaringly and glaringly apparent right to you. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of a big deal area. And what I liked about your YouTube channel, because everybody, I want you to go check out her YouTube channel. What's the name of the YouTube channel?
Block therapy.
See, threw that one over home plate for you. How easy that is. She's got a lot of great videos on there, and I believe you're doing a lot of them with your son. Am I correct? Is that your son?
It's my nephew. Yeah.
Your
Quinn
nephew.
Castle, my
Okay. Oh,
nephew.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's great too. Really like his work. And you show some cool ones on there that I've introduced to my patients of just actually lying on the sides of that rib cage to help that tension in those organs and that diaphragm. That's really powerful, that one.
It really is. And what's interesting is often people think, well, like think of somebody with fibromyalgia, for example, that is in so much pain everywhere. And then that thought of lying on something hard, they push that idea away because of the mindset that this is going to be way too painful for me. But when you actually consciously follow the process and you lie on the tool, and then you take your time with your breath. And again, you're in control of how much pressure you're applying.
Mm,
It is a beautiful decompression of that tissue because basically compression is what causes pain, aging, dis-ease, and ultimately death. We
yeah.
get pulled down toward the earth. We strangle the life out of the cells and eventually we expire because of that. So this takes you through that opposite process of putting the space back into the tissue that time has taken away. And it's fascinating because I mean this is a new concept in the world. So what does that mean for longevity, for health? I mean, I'm seeing it in my community. I'm 25 years into this and we have a beautiful community sharing the benefits. But for people that starting at a younger age that can make this a lifestyle, it's really exciting to consider the possibilities for what that means as we continue to go through time.
Yeah, absolutely. And but this kind of cycle back to the diaphragm breathing, if you don't mind. I have a lot of people that, one, like you said before, I see they just breathe so much through the neck and even the jawline and the shoulders, and they're very tense up in this region. And but they don't really do anything down below. But sometimes they'll say, "Oh, you need to breathe through your belly." And then they breathe just through the belly. Have you found that you have to help people to understand that it's not just the belly either? It's kind of like that balloon analogy of thinking about the whole thing goes. And I find that extremely challenging for people to when you try to ask them to find that, it's almost like you're looking for an alien. They can't find it.
Yes, and even more so, especially when we're dealing with younger people, because they're coming out of the mother more compressed than our generation. So the
Mm,
20 and 30-year-olds today grew up in front of technology where we didn't. You know, it came at us when we were probably closer to, well, I'm 55. I'm not sure how old you are, but closer to adulthood, where when you're growing up in this compressed state as you're developing, they're also not playing like we did. They're not hanging
right.
from trees the same. Like, so many factors have created this denser body. So when we have that amount of compression, to try to get that diaphragm moving is a challenge. And you're right, we want that whole core space to be expanding and contracting, but we need to create alignment and release first with that. So it's a process, especially for the younger people, because if you're so compressed, even just trying to get that moving a little bit can be challenging. I love James Nestor's book Breath,
Yeah.
where he really talks about focusing on that full exhale. And when we do that combined with aligning the lower body, aligning the pelvis, then we create the opportunity for the space to be in the core to really gain that proper breath. And the reason the exhale is so important, and he says it so beautifully, is when we're exhaling as the greater focus than the inhale, we're increasing the carbon dioxide in the blood. And the carbon dioxide is the currency for the oxygen to jump from the hemoglobin into the cell. So if we're compressed and we start this like diaphragmatic breathing in a more forceful way, and we're not really slowing it down and focusing on that exhale, then we're pulling all this oxygen in, but it's not going to be absorbed into the cells
Mm.
or released into the cell, because we need to make that exhale that bigger focus. So that's part of the teaching. And then because we always start in the core and the rib cage, we start by decompressing the ribs to make it easier to
Mm.
access the diaphragm. And then the more you access the diaphragm, the lighter the body, the more calm you are. And then we can continue going deeper, deeper with that perspective.
Yeah, and I love that. And it cycles back to what we were talking about before is the transport mechanism for that oxygen, to be on the hemoglobin. That's got to get there through the blood flow.
Yes.
So if you're really trapped down in those areas with such fascial tension, well, you don't even have the route available for the stuff to get there, right? So it's there, but it can't get there.
Yeah.
And people go, I never thought about it like that. And I'm like, that's kind of a big deal. That's why the fluid isometrics and things like that can make such a difference for people.
Yeah, and I always I talk about traffic, the combination of the fascia and the lymph. It's kind of like traffic.
Yeah.
When we have, like not a lot of traffic in the city and it's the middle of the night, there's ease of flow. You bring, rush hour traffic and you've got barricades and there's nothing moving. And now it becomes toxic because all of the exhaust isn't traveling either. And there's so much concentration. Like the road waves are the fascia, and then the vehicles, traveling are the lymph. And we need that movement in order to be healthy. As long as there's ease of flow, we don't really have any issues. Pain, aging, dis-ease, again, it comes from that lack of flow in the body.
Mm.
So most importantly, and I loved how you said that, about inflammation, because so many people talk about inflammation being the bad thing. Inflammation is the result of the adhesion in the scar tissue, but we need to support that inflammation through breath, through pressure over time, through understanding how to support the fascia. Where if we don't support the inflammation, it gets backed up, it becomes stagnant, then it becomes problematic. But it
Mm.
really is, it's the gold in the body, the body saying, hey, we need to direct some extra blood flow over to this area because there's a need over here. And yet we don't support inflammation properly traditionally. We're taught the rice method. We have an
Right.
injury, we want to ice,
Right.
but now we're going to freeze the body even further and slow down the healing opportunity and actually create a very different outcome from injury than if you actually understand how to support the inflammation and allow the tissue to be rebuilt as
Mm.
opposed to allowing scar tissue to take its place.
Yeah, that's one of the things that attracted me to the Eastern medicine approaches and Ayurvedic medicine approaches is one, they're just looking at energy systems in the body, but they didn't use ice. They're all about heat, bringing in warmth, right? And I
Yes.
think research is kind of coming around because I see some studies are saying, well, we might not have got that one totally correct. with the ice part. Oopsie daisy, you know. But that's how you just learn and you change up and you be better. So one of my favorite ones that you showed um, was you had this gentleman on. I can't remember his name. He
Walter,
was,
yeah,
yeah,
beautiful.
Walter's a rock star, man. I like
He is.
that guy. Of how he just completely almost changed into a different person. And I watched his series, but the one that you went through with your nephew there on the working with his ankle and his feet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, because I got your blocks. And I said, let me stand on that mini block sucker. Oh, man, what a wake up call for me because I do footwork, but it was clear I better be doing a little bit more footwork. But of how that manifested up the chain just by standing on that block. Do you want to maybe cycle in a little bit about that, how that is so helpful, but even maybe talk about Walter a little bit? Because that's a really nice story.
Yeah, and Walter, he came into my awareness probably a year and a half ago. So I had just finished doing a 30-day upper body challenge. And
Hmm.
I would say 95% of my community are women between 45 and 75 years old. So then it was a couple of months after we actually had the challenge where he did it on his own. It's just lives in my membership. So he does this and then he posts his before and afters in my membership. And I see this and I'm like, oh my gosh, like he was 73 at the time. And the change that he made was phenomenal. So then I reached out to him and I said, I really need more men speaking because men follow men more. And, like let's get on a video. So we did that. And he also shared about how so I have a technique working between the toes, which I'll share in a moment. And he was sharing that he was doing that for his father, who was 102 years old
Whoa.
and who was not mobile, hardly eating, very close to passing. And then he ended up living another 8 or 9 months, but he started walking. He was eating. He lived this life of joy. So, Walter would be talking about, he would work on his dad's feet every single day. And he created this completely different opportunity for the last number of months of his life as a result. So, anyways, then I flew Walter to Winnipeg and I worked on him. He's now an instructor in Ireland and he is
Oh,
just
wow. So
the
good for
befores
him.
and afters of him now. Like he keeps showing me like the changes in his body and they are truly phenomenal what he's done. In fact, I would love to show this just because we haven't posted this anywhere yet and I want to see if I can just okay, yes,
Yeah,
this
please do.
was a year ago. Where are you? There we go. This was a year ago. He was in Winnipeg. That's what he looked like. And this is his after picture from when he initially started. So he's sitting in our set. He created some class, or I created some classes using him as the model. And then this is his picture today. So 1 year later, how he's sitting up
Whoa.
so much more aligned. He shares the same birthday as me. He's turning 75 July 13th. And
That's
he
incredible.
continues to get younger and younger and younger. And so it's amazing. Like he's a force of nature. And I'm so incredibly grateful that he's out there spreading the word because he's really doing it and he loves the work. And this is all he does. So it's fascinating. But one of the things that we share all the time is how important it is to change the patterning of the webbing between the toes. And
Hmm.
this is probably, besides the breath, one of the most important things that everybody can do. And if you make it a daily practice, it won't be long before you start seeing incredible changes up the body. So we tell you to take a pencil or a finger, and you want to work between each and every toe for about 3 minutes as you focus on that full exhale,
Hmm.
because the toes are literally the most frozen area of the body. They are the furthest from the engine, and how the toes get twisted over time. It's all based on what's going on with the alignment of the feet. So when we can actually release the toes and bring them back into the equation of how we stand, how we walk, they've actually shown through a study that longevity and toe strength are intimately connected. So when
Hmm.
we can bring those toes back in and we can create proper alignment and we start walking differently, that again affects everything up the chain. Because just like in my 30-story building, if the foundation is off, the
Hmm.
entire building is affected. So to bring that understanding into that foundation and then allow the energy to move out of the body into the earth through trauma release and then pulling that life force from the planet into the body. Like the feet are this beautiful exchange, but if they're bound and frozen, then they become a barricade. And that's also another reason why when I was working with Dr. Eric Robbins with TRE, he was doing a lot of TRE, and he noticed that when he started blocking his calves, he had such a better release of his trauma from his body, because prior to that they were bound, so then the energy can't move out, so we
Mm,
disrupt it from our system. But if it gets stuck and stored in the body and it can't leave, then it can oftentimes disrupt us even further in a negative way. We need to be able to pull it up but let it go. So having that understanding of how significant the feet are, I mean, it just keeps coming full circle. One other thing that's wild, somebody in my community just posted this a couple of weeks ago. She had a sty in her eye for 10 months and was going to go for a surgery. 2 days of releasing the toes and the sty burst, and she doesn't need the
mm.
surgery now. It's like the weirdest things happen from this. It's fascinating. I just love listening to all the examples people give of the benefits.
Yeah, I love that. And plus they're tight, and then people are jamming in what I call them foot coffins that are
Yes,
shoes, because they just slowly kill your feet living in the dark. And then how many people actually pay attention to the toe unless they stub it in the middle of the night? Then you realize how much it hurts and how neurologically powerful it is because of the pain.
that's for sure.
But there's a lot of acupuncture points that they go after down in there in the Eastern medicine perspective on the toes and in between the toes. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
that
know
and
for
fingers. Another one I always share too is
ah,
because the feet and the fingers, again, furthest things. If we can 3 minutes move between the webbing, between
mm,
all the fingers, we should be
yeah.
standing anatomical position as palms forward, but the majority of all people are walking with the palms facing the back of the body, which creates internal rotation of the arms and a collapsing of the rib cage. Releasing the fingers as well brings a lightness into the upper body. It helps us align the arms and takes tremendous pressure and stress off of the back of the neck and the jaw. And then that allows better blood flow into the brain and better lymphatic drainage, the whole thing. So these little daily things that we can do, that we can also
Mm.
do when we're doing other things. I mean, I can sit here, talk to you, and I can work on my hands and nobody has to see. Or, I'll be watching a TV show and I'll be working on my toes. It's such incredible benefit for very little time, and it's free, which is most important for so many people too.
Yeah, I love that. I call them high value targets. Some that, when you start working on them, they just pay huge dividends throughout the rest of the body.
Yes. I love that. Nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I want to ask you one more question. We've got the value of the hands, the feet, the calves, the diaphragm, and the abdomen, which is great. What I loved about the work too that you showed is that very few people, because I look at this area a lot, very few people even look at the role of the sternum in relationship to tightness or tension in the rib cage at all. Because when they think rib cage, they just think about the back part of the rib cage.
Yes.
And you have a section on there where yeah, we were lying on one of the blocks on the sternum for a period of time. And that one was a really powerful one for me. That was the one I could see my nervous system was most resistant to go into, which was quite interesting. So
Yeah.
I took
And
my time. But can you talk about the value of that region for you and your work? And when do you start going into that region for people?
Um, right away.
Uh,
So because the adhesion will grip to bone with that 2,000 pound per square inch seal, and we've got this big plate of bone right here. So when I'm collapsing this way, the fascia, the adhesions, they're getting trapped and glued and
mm,
stuck here, holding you into that alignment. So now the heart and the lungs get pushed to the back of the body. They should be at the front of the rib cage. And we've got the thymus gland right underneath there that's getting basically blocked. So when we start releasing the adhesions on the sternum, it allows the heart and the lungs to migrate more to the front of the body. It also releases that collapsing, that fear response that we get into, and it opens things up so that we can start to release the diaphragm and use it most effectively. So that is one of the most important areas as well. The whole rib cage really is so significant, but because of the flat bone that the sternum is,
Mm,
it's such a landmark for those adhesions to hold the rib cage in that negative alignment. And then that in turn causes the major lymphatic drainage sites to be blocked here in the neck. It
mm.
causes the head to get pulled forward. Now we have thyroid issues, carotid arteries aren't working properly, and we're not getting that proper lymphatic flow from the brain, from the eyes, from all of the structures. So it's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. But that ties kind of into my story again. I some people know this if they've modeled my work, but I had thyroid cancer about 23 years ago, and they removed the thyroid gland, and they had to take out a substantial amount of cervical lymph nodes because it traveled. So yeah, I was compromised for who knows how many years before I was even diagnosed with that. Now that I know. And then because they removed some anatomy and scar tissue in there, then I remained compromised. But I think that's actually one of the reasons why this area was such a key one for my nervous system, because this one was tied to everything that you just mentioned in this particular region here. And then
Yeah.
following from the Eastern medicine perspective, this is the area that holds grief and sorrow because of the lungs. And then I can tie that back now to losing my father from cancer at age 14.
Oh,
So
well,
I
yeah.
think that, now that I've been able to come through the other side of things to start to see how all these um, mix together. And that's what I was saying before I came on for us to talk is I love all that you teach. I love the techniques that you teach, but I love the way that you teach it. You have such a healing, authentic energy about what you're sharing because, it changed your life and then you see it do the same for other people. So now that everybody's listening to this, I just wanted to say thank you so much for that and for the
Oh,
work that you do.
thank you so much. That
So, with
that that
that being said, because I know people are going to be excited to learn more and be able to do more, this will be in the show notes, everybody, so you can click stuff. But Dan, I'd like for you to tell people where they can go to, maybe have somebody to work with them, learn to do it on their own, do some techniques so they can begin to experience this for themselves.
So my website is blocktherapy.com, and you can definitely get our starter program. It's the place you want to start, the starter program with the blocks. We also have a sampler program that's $9 that teaches you to use a rolled up towel just to get a sense if this works for you, and then you want to follow through. Then it's a nice way to have a little tester. Again, on our YouTube channel, we have tons and tons of free information and demonstration if people want to jump in there as well. And I have teachers all over the world, teachers as well as body workers. We're getting traction and getting more certified throughout the world. So we do have under our About section a teacher finder map. If you're wanting to find a teacher in your area, that's also a wonderful thing to do. Even we have an estheticians program. So we're now teaching estheticians how to do natural facelifts using our paddle, our newest tool. So that's also a lovely thing because so much of the process that people do to attempt to stay looking young can actually cause increased aging of your tissue, of your cells. So really
Mm.
understanding how to approach aging in a healthy way is obviously so very important.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. So, yeah. So the videos on YouTube are great, really high quality videos. I enjoy those quite a lot. And Deanna, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to all my listeners. We really enjoyed it.
Oh, well, thank you so very much for this opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to more collaborations in the future with you.
Oh, there's definitely going to be that for sure. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in. This is Dr. Perry from the Stop Chasing Pain podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a great one.